All right, welcome back. Today we looked at historic globalization coming to China, and this gives us another opportunity to check in with our A2 writing development, and we are a little less than 2 weeks away from writing our first A2. So I'd like to review some of the stuff we've looked at so far with regards to the A2 writing assignment, and look ahead a little bit to the possibility of what you might want to look at with your midterm coming in about 2 weeks in terms of the in-class essay. So when we started developing our A2 writing skills, we ended up looking at some sources. So for example, we looked at this one. Read is both the cornerstone and the tragic flaw of globalization. As a consequence, natural inequalities emerge. And as we looked at these sources, we unpacked them to find a connection to the theme, which is globalization, and we want it to be more specific and break down it into big rocks, words like cornerstone and greed, inequality, in order to find a perspective about globalization. Is globalization something we should reflect? And if so, how do we know it from the language? What language says it's a good thing? Or is globalization something we need to be concerned about, something we should reject? And if so, what language announces that perspective? We also looked at the need to find some significance. Why is this an issue that is worthy of our attention? We also looked at it to discover the division of society. Would everyone agree with the ideological perspective that is being presented? So in a little less than 2 weeks, you'll get a chance to do this for me in class. But I need to say, writing the in-class A2 essay, it's not like you're going to be coming in blind to the essay. It's not like you're going to be coming in that day, flipping over the sheet of paper or opening up the Google document and saying, oh, that's the topic. This is the topic. We've been really looking at one essay topic here. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. This idea about inequality. This idea about exploitation in the ancient and historic global arenas. And I think that because you know the topic, your due diligence is to prepare for it. So if that means you want to create a rough draft and submit it to me to get some feedback, by all means, I would encourage you to do that. But in a little less than 2 weeks, you'll be doing it in class as an exam. So once again, the essay topic will be about inequality in the global arena in the ancient and historic time periods. We want you to explore the relationship between the strong and the weak. So I may simply just give you that quote, the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. I might give you this quote, which is looking at the same topic, just slightly twisted in terms of the language used to explore it. So something that you can do is to prep for it. You can take one of these documents I've shared with you and create a rough draft and say, Mr. McBride, this is what I would do to analyze the source. This is what I'd do in terms of my thesis statement. And this is my evidence that I'd be thinking of exploring to defend my argumentation. When we get to the midterm, the multiple choice is worth 15%. So we'll end up spending some time on multiple choice before then. The essay is 6 and the A1 is 4. The A1 is the minor writing assignment. So we've done a lot of work with A1, but I think that in the 2 weeks that we have, it might be to your benefit to be spending some time on A2, to do some practice writing, to look at the exemplars that I've shared with you. So I think that today's topic of China gives us a chance to look at that evidence. So we've looked at this one, greed is both the cornerstone and the tragic flaw of globalization. As a consequence, natural inequalities emerge. We talked about how we broke down the source to analyze it, to find a perspective, to see its connection to globalization, to see how there's a problem that they have with globalization, and within that problem we can see a tone and motivation and audience, some kind of intended response. What do they want us to do given this observation? We also, about a week ago, looked at the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. We looked at it in depth. We looked at it by exploring the actual history behind the quote. So if you are writing, and you will be writing, an essay on this theme, in that essay somewhere, in your body or in the analysis, there's an opportunity to tell us a condensed, a shortened version of the history behind the quote and the significance of it, the continued significance of the relationship between the strong and the weak that the quote is describing. So we looked at the history behind it, we watched some video on it, and we also talked about how we could develop an essay connected to this. So if we're developing an essay connected to the strong may have the power to do what they want, you can certainly look at the story of the Chinese. And you can see that economic power, section 2, as a result of the age of exploration during the 19th century, the British came into direct contact with the Chinese. Due to superior weapons technology, the British were now able to enforce their will on the Chinese. This new power relationship is referred to by the Chinese as the century of humiliation. So the case study we did this morning fits right there in this essay. So what you need to be doing as a student to get ready for the essay is getting these case studies ready. So in the future, we're going to be looking at Africa, and that would help you explore the second paragraph, potentially, of your response to this thesis, that it may appear to be natural for the strong to do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. We're going to be looking at the theory of social Darwinism and white man theory and European scramble and imperialism for Africa. But this third paragraph is not justifiable to feed on the weak. This is something that there's not going to be a specific case study or one moment, but it may be a collection of case studies. Certainly, I think that our look at the slave trade would fit in right there when you want to look at immoral actions. Now, it may not be imperialism, but it is domination of one group of people against another. And I think that you can explore some of this mutual benefit too as we look at the movie Gandhi next week. As we watch Gandhi next week, one thing to be looking for is to say, wait a minute, how is the British presence in India potentially helping India? And how is it hurting them? So in preparation for the essay, since we'll be writing an essay, either this very one or something similar to it, we need to start collecting our case studies. Because if on the day of the essay, you haven't really thought of the essay before, you're going to be disappointed with how much you can piece together on that day. So we need to begin to piece things together. So as we piece things together, you may want to, even if it's not an assignment, you may want to send me a rough draft and say, Mr. McBride, here's what I would do to talk about the strong can do whatever they want in an essay. Is it adequate? Is it straightforward? Is it incomplete? Is it sound? Is it insightful? Where am I at in terms of the mark? I think that's the best way to get ready for the essay. Here's another sample essay that I've shared with you. Again, by reading over the sample essays on this topic, you can see the variety of evidence that people use. You can see that some of the evidence comes from outside of social studies. So there might be evidence from English language arts. There might be that literary evidence or hypothetical evidence. And it's evidence like that that can really distinguish your writing against others. But the reason I shared this document with you 10 days ago, it looks like, is so that you can have an exemplar of what the E bar looks like. I don't want to give you an exemplar of an L bar and say this is what 40% looks like. I'm not trying to push you to a 40. I'm trying to push you to 100. So in the next 2 weeks, I would say read over the exemplar again, but start making your version of it. Start piecing together your argument about the nature of globalization. This idea that we look into a mirror and we see ourselves. as we look into globalization, it provides us a mirror into our nature. So within 2 weeks, you'll be writing about what is the nature of globalization. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. That's the nature. If the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must is the nature of globalization, what does that say about us? That's what you're writing about. So there's something to prepare for sure. I've got some other documents here that I can share with you. You can take that and keep that one if you want.
Okay.
You need one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sean just dropped off another one, So we've got some past essay prompts that we can look at. So we're looking at India next week, and you'll have to come up with a song for the introduction of the India unit, since we have the song for the Africa unit that you want to listen to today. So somebody has to come up with an Indian song for us, maybe some dance. Maybe we can do some traditional Indian dance. That'd be pretty cool. Here's a quote from India that, although this won't be your source for the essay, you could see something like this on your A1, but this is kind of like something to look forward to moving forward. It says, in summary, that imperialism is the knife of sugar. So in India, in their language, it sounds cooler, the Sakakariya, and I just destroyed that. You know, if anybody's watching this, they're like, man, shut this guy up, he's horrible. But it's the knife of sugar. It is all sweet, it is all smooth and sweet, but it is a knife notwithstanding. So as we watch the Gandhi video next week, we're not watching it just because I want to spend 3 hours watching a movie so that I can stop talking for a little bit. It's a 3-hour movie. What I do want to, the reason why I want to watch it, is so that you can see and really judge imperialism. Because globalization, the manifestation of globalization in this time period really is imperialism. That's the relationship being created, is one of imperialism. And I need you to understand that imperialism can be both good and bad. And that's why it's a knife of sugar. It's a knife of sugar. There's some good stuff, but it's still a knife. Still a knife. So, I definitely want you to be considering that as we watch it, so I'm kind of planting some ideas now. So one thing that you can be thinking of is, what are some arguments that I might be able to make here? Although, probably should be a comma there, that's why it's underlined, although mankind may proclaim that they are inspired to serve God, the 3 G's of imperialism, gold, God, glory. Although mankind may proclaim that they are inspired to serve God, the age of imperialism shows that due to our greedy and competitive nature, mankind is likely to only be self-serving. It is because of this quality we have committed terrible crimes against each other. That could be your thesis, depending upon how you can word it related to the source I give you in 2 weeks. It's that kind of stuff that you're exploring. So when we go to Africa, and we study why Europeans go to Africa, we'll see that some Europeans go to Africa to serve God. But many go there to serve themselves. The strong writing begins with a plan. And we're trying to give you the plan before we do the research. So this morning, with China, we had a plan before we did the research. We're going to do some research on China. We want to see that China was humbled, but it was necessary. Ultimately, it helped them. We had a plan. And it made it more purposeful. Now, before we study Africa and India, we need to know, why are we studying this? What am I looking for? We're looking for some kind of evidence that you can use to determine the nature of globalization in this case, historic time period. So here's another possible statement that you could make. Imperialism is the justified policy where the strong control the weak. Not only is it natural, it has been known to benefit both parties. So that could be your thesis next, or in 2 weeks. So you'd write one body paragraph. Imperialism is justified where the strong control the weak. Another body paragraph, this is natural. And a final body paragraph, benefits both. There's your essay. The thesis statement allows you to have a very logical organization of the body. These are all examples of essays that we've used in the past. Some years I used to make my students write 8 essays in Social 10. It's a different time when they could pass paper to me and I could mark paper, and I don't want to touch your papers this year, right? So we're doing less, but I want to say we're going to do better. We're going to dive deeper into this essay so that you'll have so much to write about. You don't need to do 8 because you're going to do an excellent job this first time. Globalization has confirmed the true nature of mankind, an irrational, violent, and exploitive being capable of committing unethical and evil acts against each other. If mankind is to have a future, our very nature needs to change. What's different about this thesis? It future casts in that final sentence. Not only does it look backwards, it's trying to look forward and saying, oh, wait a minute, if we don't change, we won't likely be around for long. We need to stop being exploitive, violent, irrational. This is different. In the 19th century, financial lust and arrogant racism combined to justify unprecedented subjugation, or subjection. It should be subjugation. Shaming both plunderer and slaughtered. So in this essay, if that was your thesis, you'd have a section where you're like, here's imperialism in the 19th century, and this is why it was financial. This is the financial reasons why they did it. There's financial reasons why Britain goes to China. They wanted to sell their products. So why did they go to China? Were they trying to, oh man, we want to conquer the Great Wall of China? No, they wanted to be able to export their goods. It's all about capitalism, all about mercantilism, all about the need to control the global market. But then there's a racist element, and arrogant racism. So the inclusive thing here, in the 19th century, financial lust and arrogant racism combined to justify unprecedented subjugation. Hate when that happens. Because of the wording of that, you could talk about the slave trade. It doesn't have to be just imperialism, because racism was definitely a component of slavery. Shaming both the plunderer and the slaughtered. So shame was brought to China, but it was shameful for the British to be doing what they did as well. So this could be an argument that you make in less than 2 weeks in class. Keeping in mind that that exemplar essay is 7 pages long. So hopefully I have your attention. So we looked at this one, and it's going to be something like that, right? This idea, I want you to look at the idea that globalization provides a window. That when we look into it, we see ourselves. We see our nature. And I want you to be able to explore the idea that, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Your essay will be a combination of those two things. This idea of cornerstones. We've talked a lot about cornerstones. So I think I'd like to throw the idea of cornerstones at you. So here's another essay. This is not one that you'll be doing this year. But again, by looking at it just quickly here, we can remind ourselves, what do we need to do? When you have a full morning to write an essay. So we're not writing an essay in a 60-minute class. We're writing an essay. You guys come in at 8:30. Our class goes to 12:25. There's a lunch hour. Yes, I get that. And we have a break in the morning. But there's nearly 4 hours there. With breaks, it's more like 3 hours. That's a long time to write an essay. So you should have some time when you get there to sit down and brainstorm. Have a plan before you start writing. Brainstorm. Look at the big rocks. What are the key words? What's the theme? Is there some kind of problem that inspired the source? What's the significance of that problem? What will happen if we don't solve the problem? What's the perspective or solution to the problem? What are some key words that announce that solution, that ideological perspective? Talk about tone and audience. Talk about the urgency, the intended response. And also No, don't talk about the division of society. Some people will look at the solution and say, no, you know what, that solution won't work. You're limited. You're making some assumptions that don't work. And these people will be opponents to the source. And they would have evidence to support that the source is wrong, and then ultimately you put in your thesis. And your thesis should be able to be subdivided into smaller arguments. And those arguments can include theoretical, hypothetical, historical, and contemporary evidence. So it'll be to your benefit to begin to collect these things. So we've thrown some theoretical evidence at you already when we talked about ideas like might is right and realism. So that is a quick review of some things that you should be thinking about for the essay. So to do well in 2 weeks on the essay means you're thinking about the essay now. You're thinking about the essay, maybe putting together some rough work and saying, Mr. McBride, here's what I think about the concept, the strong do what they can. This is what I would write. Or the weak suffer what they must. Or what should be the cornerstones of globalization. Or the idea that globalization is a mirror and it reflects our true nature. But moving on, we'll also be evaluated in less than 2 weeks on some multiple choice. I'd like to just show you what multiple choice looks like to some extent in Social 10. So you had multiple choice last year, and you had a, depending upon which semester you were in, I guess, you had multiple choice last year. And you had PAT again, depending upon which semester you were in. So if you were semester 2 last year, social studies, social 9, you haven't seen a lot of multiple choice. So we do need to show you some multiple choice. Now there's some straightforward type of multiple choice. I may give you sources. Most of the multiple choice will be source-based. So I can't guarantee how many questions there are because I have a test ready, but honestly, things have to be different right now while they're quartered and while we're under these kinds of conditions with masks and stuff. So there's some stuff that we would have done differently if we had an 80-minute class every day for 4 months instead of having, 2 times that for half as long. So some of the questions I may have to take off my exam and put on some other ones. But here's an example of a question. I'll give you a source, could be a cartoon, and then ask a question. So the ideological perspective of the mother country, so this person, reflects the foreign policy of what? So this multiple choice is actually very similar to an A1. All that work we've done with A1 is the same skill that you need for this question. Because we want you to find an ideological perspective. In order to do multiple choice, you need to learn the vocabulary. So you need to get the terminology down. We still have lessons left, including lessons on economics, where we'll talk about the Columbian Exchange and mercantilism. But looking at this, by the time you're done the unit, you should be able to say, oh, I can totally see which foreign policy she wants, based upon what these individuals are doing. Being that the colonies are delivering raw materials, foodstuffs, and gold and silver to feed the mother country, that is one of these 4 topics. So you might see questions like that. We're going to be studying Africa tomorrow, and when we study Africa, we'll be looking at some sources from Africa, and we might try to look at some cause and effect relationships. Another relationship that we want you to get in A1 is cause and effect between 2 sources. Same skill is being done here with these 3 sources in a multiple choice. Which 2 multiple choice questions show a cause and effect relationship? We might have some simple ones that have a map and say, okay, well, what are we showing you here? Sugar goes this way, textiles and rums goes this way, slaves goes this way. What kind of economic system is being shown there? When we do the Scramble for Africa tomorrow, we'll be looking at some visuals from the time period like this, about the carving of Africa with the Berlin Conference. And of those in attendance at this conference, the only empire to make a profit during historical globalization. So this is one where kind of recall based. There's no answer in the source. Source is just there to give you guidance of the time period, but this is one that you'll have to remember some of the stuff we talk about during the lesson tomorrow. So based on the lesson today on the humbling of China, we have China as this egg, and we've got these people. These are the Germans and the French and the Russians and the British. Japanese should be around here somewhere. The Americans are watching, but they're not taking part, but they're all trying to claim some ownership over China. We've got the opium dens. We've got the spheres of influence in China. So we might pull some sources like this. Here's the opium sales in China as they explode, as they're forced to open their borders up. Here's that cartoon that I mentioned today. Here's some abandonment of children because kids are off, or the adults are off doing opium and embracing that culture to the point that they're eating rats because they are so focused on the drugs they have little else to make a wage to eat something better than rat. But then you might have to look things over and say, okay, which sources have a similar perspective, similar context? Which one looks at a social outcome of opium trade? Not an economic outcome, but a social problem. So society's breaking down. Which one shows a British perspective? So, lots of sources that we could give you on this unit as part of the test as well. So something to look forward to is when we get to the multiple choice, you're still going to see the sources, but we're going to be using the sources to try to test the vocabulary and test your ability to find something further about them. Unfortunately, this next one is broken up into two parts, so it's a little harder to view. So instead, I think I have, here's the sources here, and then the question, so that's a little harder to see. Here's another version. So this is more of the stuff from related issue 1. So you might have a visual, and the question might be asking you about the dimensions of globalization, or the power of the media in our lives. So definitely lots of potential for some questions on the multiple choice exam that you should be studying now for. That's why I'm spending this last bit of this class. You should be going over some of your notes, looking back over the language and saying, do I understand what these terms mean? But as we can see here with this question, it's not just a memorization of the term globalization. Now you have to apply it. So the history of globalization is the story of a series of planetary contractions. Which of the following is the best example of a planetary contraction? So this is more a reading comp application. Hopefully I don't give you an exam where the answer key is listed with a little snowflake right next to the answer. That might be a little too easy. But you'll be getting this in 2 weeks. So right before the Thanksgiving break, so 2 weeks from today, you'll have your multiple choice. And it's worth 15% of the year. It is a true midterm. Because we'll be at the midpoint, we'll be past the midpoint, but we'll be testing up to the midpoint. We're past it because we're going to continue to learn and give you a little bit of space there to absorb stuff before you get tested. We don't want to test you the day after we're done the unit. So, in summary, we have some midterms coming up, but that doesn't mean that you wait 2 weeks to get ready. I think you need to be getting ready now. So that if you do have questions, you can ask me those questions in the morning. I'm sitting here in the morning at 8:30 talking hockey. I'd rather be talking social studies. We have 20 minutes built in every day for a review. So when you come in early, if you're having questions and you're like, okay, we studied this yesterday, I don't see the connection with stuff. Those are the moments that we should be reviewing together. So, to kind of get ready for tomorrow, we're going to quickly listen to a song about Africa, and then I'm going to show you some sources on Africa that we'll unpack tomorrow.